Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay in the back as well? It's so good to see you all here tonight here at the Bali. A very warm welcome. Also a very warm welcome to the people watching at home. So nice of you to join us. My name is Rick Seveke. I'm a program editor here at the Bali. I'm responsible for the educational programming. And you are here at the gathering. Hallo, kom gauw binnen. For the lecture of programmer, illustrator, author Linda Liukas, who's going to speak on programming and its role on education. Before I give the stage to our keynote speaker, I'd like to get a feel of who we have in the audience. Are there any teachers in the audience? A lot, that's good. Who is a novice, so a beginner when it comes to programming and coding and... Yeah, a couple of beginners. Do we have programmers themselves, experts in programming also? So it's a diverse audience, that's good. The setup for the evening is pretty straightforward. We're gonna Linda's gonna give her keynote speech. That'll take about 30 minutes or so. Then I'm gonna ask her to sit on stage, and I have a couple of questions prepared. Some questions for the beginners in the audience. I myself am a beginner as well, and I'm sure there are beginners watching from home. So for the people who already know a lot about programming, bear with us for just a couple of minutes for the first segment of the interview. We're going to talk about some different aspects when it comes to programming as well. We're going to talk about maybe an ethical dimension of programming. Maybe there are some societal challenges that lie ahead, and what role can programming and programming in education play in solving those challenges. I've asked a second speaker to join us for the second half of the conversation, which is Remco Pijpers. He works for Kennisnet. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Kennisnet, but we're going to talk about that later on in the evening. And at the end, there will be room and space for you to ask some questions as well. So when you listen to the keynote of Linda and when you listen to the interview, make sure that if you have a question, keep it in mind, and at the end you can ask. I will come towards you with the microphone so that people at home can hear you as well. If you have a question, please stand up, raise your hand, and I will come to you at the end. Those are all the huishoudelijke mededelingen. I'm not sure how that translates into English. Hallo. Kom gauw binnen. So, without further ado, I would like you to give a very warm welcome to programmer, author, illustrator, and she's much more actually, Linda Liukas.
You pronounced my name perfectly without even me having to cue it in, so good job. My name is Linda. I'm a writer, I'm an author, I'm an illustrator, I'm a very mediocre programmer, so there's probably better programmers in the room here, and I'm a business school dropout. And as you can see, 3 of those identities are in parentheses, because I still feel all the time as an imposter and someone who's almost there, except for the business school dropout part that I'm pretty sure about. And that's kind of the topic of this talk today. We people, we contain multitudes. We can be many things at the same time, and that's our power. Computers, they are one thing or the other. I'm the co-founder of Railskills, a non-profit movement that teaches young women programming, also in English, even though the text here is in Finnish. It gives young women their first experience in software craftsmanship in over 260 cities around the world, everywhere from Amman to Australia and Belo Horizonte to Berlin. I worked at Codecademy, a massive online open community that teaches people programming, 25 million people programming all over the world. And after Codecademy, I felt a little bit jaded with all of the startup ethos in the world, and I felt that, oh wow, like the most important things in the world can't be decided by startups, and there's bound to be something bigger and more meaningful I can do with my life. And in the same way as Astrid Lindgren, the author, the Swedish author, said that the world peace starts from the children's room, from the children's bedroom, I felt that, wow, if we really want to have scalable change in the world, we need to start from the very smallest of us. So everyone here in the audience working in education, I have a huge respect for you. And I decided that I will be a children's book author. I had absolutely no idea how to do this, and I did the best and the worst thing I've done in my life. I put my little tiny side project on kids and coding to Kickstarter, where it ended up gathering $380,000 worth of pre-orders in 30 days, and I absolutely panicked because I had no idea what I was doing. And for the past 2 years, I've been a children's book author. The book is finally now out, also in Dutch. And this is kind of a lesson and a journey in what I've learned about programming, coding, education, and maybe about life too. In the true format of a children's book, I'm going to tell this story in 4 little chapters. And when I was thinking about how to tell this story in particular, I came to the wise person, my favorite storyteller of all time, namely Lewis Carroll, who beautifully combines logic and magic and is probably the role model for us today on how to creatively teach technology. And Carroll has this famous line of believing in 6 impossible things before breakfast. So I would like you to turn your heads into the impossibility state and follow with me through the rabbit hole. I think software and code is the interface to my generation's imagination. I think we live in a world that is becoming computers, and the scariest thing of all is that we make computers seem either boring, mechanical, or magic, and all of those 3 things are really bad. So in this first chapter, we'll start from the very beginning of the story and try to sort of go through how computers then ought to be taught. And to get started with this story, we need to start from where the best stories in the world always start from, namely from love. And this was a very specific type of love. This was a teenage girl's love. And I was 13 years old, and my teenage girl heart was nearly pumping out of my breast because I had a huge crush on an older man. Other girls, they loved Legolas, and they loved Elijah Wood. Lord of the Rings was really big at the time, and they loved gothic rock stars. But I loved the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Al Gore. And I had this scrapbook about him. I had it everywhere with me, and at some point the pictures weren't enough. I wanted to express all of this love a little bit bigger and further and massively, so I made a website for him, and it's here. And this was 2009, so 2001. So there was no Facebook, there was no Tumblr, there was no Pinterest. The only way a teenage girl could express all of the excitement and love was by learning to code. So I learned PHP, and I learned HTML, and I learned CSS, and I learned how servers work. And when this site was up, I felt, wow, technology is the thing that I want to do in life. This is amazing. But there were other boys. There were other things to get excited about, like knitting and philosophy and social sciences and French. Like studying French was a big thing for me at the time. And I started to feel that, oh wow, like maybe this technology stuff, it's pretty boring and pretty lonely and pretty introverted, and it's only for the smelly teenage boys over there. And I forgot about coding. Here's what I think today. I think little girls, they don't know that they are not supposed to like computers. They are really smart. They are really precise. They can concentrate so well. They are really good at asking questions like how and why and what if. And they don't know that they are not supposed to like computers. It's us parents who do. It's us adults who say that, oh, like, you're probably a girl who doesn't like computers. You're really good with languages. You should study French. And they fail to notice that a little girl who liked conjugating French irregular verbs was actually practicing her pattern recognition skills, a crucial thing when you're programming. A little girl who liked knitting socks was actually following a sequence of symbolic commands with loops inside of them, like follow this line until you hit the elbow. And a little girl who loved Bertrand Russell and his eternal quest to find an exact language between English and mathematics, which eventually would be called logic and eventually would find its home inside of a computer, would totally make a good programmer. No one made those connections. To some extent, the parents are right. There's an awful lot of things you need to understand even before you can write your first hello world. There's syntax, control flow, data structures, algorithms. We've built abstraction on top of abstraction to the point where we, as consumers, we have no idea how computers work anymore. When our kids come to us and say, "Hey, Linda, how does the computer know what to show when I press the play button on YouTube?" Or, "Linda, what is bubble sort algorithm?" Or, Linda, is internet a place?" We adults, we grow silent. We say, "Oh, it's really complicated," or, "Oh, wow, it's magic." Well, it's neither. It's not magic and it's not complicated. It all just happened really, really fast. And our kids, they are surrounded by this world of technology. They tap and they swipe and they pinch their way through the world. And unless we are willing to give them a totally new kind of education around computers, we are failing as adults. I think in the same way as when we teach Dutch, we don't only teach punctuation rules. We don't only teach grammar, like conjugation. We teach them to use the language. We teach them to write poetry, really bad ones. And we teach them to write essays. We read contemporary novels and classics. We teach them to use a language. And that's what we should be doing with technology. So chapter 2, where we look a little bit further into what I mean when I talk about having this different way of teaching technology, having a shared vocabulary into programming. I've talked to you a little bit about Ruby. She's the heroine of the book. She's 6 years old. She's completely fearless, a little bit bossy, and very imaginative. And in Ruby's world, things that sometimes are boring in classroom are taught through play and exploration. So in Ruby's world, the curriculum of code might look like this, where the idea of repetition, the idea that a computer is really good at repeating things, it doesn't get bored, it likes the tedious stuff, it doesn't need lunch breaks. A perfect way to teach this concept, for instance, is through dancing. And Ruby's favorite dance move, it goes like this. It goes clap, clap, stomp, stomp, clap, clap, and jump. And we learn a for loop by repeating this sequence 5 times. And we learn a while loop by repeating this sequence while I'm standing on one leg. And we learn an until loop by repeating this sequence until mom gets really, really frustrated. In Ruby's world, you learn decomposing problems. You learn to look at different kinds of problems and see how to solve them. For instance, Android has clearly forgotten to do one step in the progress of making a bath, and the fox has done something in the wrong order, and little Ruby, she has something funky happening in the loop because she keeps on eating even though she's not full, and so forth and so forth. And finally, kids learn about algorithms. Whoa, what a big, hard word, at least for the adults. But kids, they are so proud when they learn algorithm. And they learn that an algorithm is actually a step-by-step instruction to solve a problem. So for instance, a cupcake recipe is really an algorithm. And good algorithms are ones where you can swap ingredients. For instance, if you want to make banana muffins instead of blueberry muffins, and then you want to make different amounts of cupcakes. But the most important thing the kids learn is that even the biggest problems in the world are just tiny problems stuck together. And this is the most important thing I've learned from CS, or computer science. I think the reason why we want to be teaching these things for kids is not that we would want to have a cadre of programmers ready to march into the corporations and work there. We want to teach these things because all problems in the world will be computer problems that need a human flair to be solved. We want kids to understand these are the problems that a computer can solve. These are the problems that a human can solve. And we want kids not to be afraid of computers. We want more kids who embrace technology. So chapter 3, where we start to get more concrete. I'm really jealous for those of you who were born in or who went through the education system in the 60s and 70s. You might not believe me, but you had this tangible relationship with technology. You had transistor radios that you could take apart. Nowadays, you can have a million transistors in the end of a pen point, and there's no way to understand how technology works. Everything is sleek and glassy and hidden from us. And it might be that you hated the programming lessons you did in school, the basic programming or the weird calculus exercises you did with the teleprompter, but at least you got to see how the computer worked and use it as a problem-solving machine. My generation, we learned to use Microsoft Office, and that's that. And I think the education system should take a step further and really think what is joyful in programming. In my opinion, there's two types of joys. There's the more abstract joy, the joy of writing a really complex algorithm or abstracting a function call properly. And that's the type of joy you kind of have in the AP computer science classes. You write programs to calculate the first 20 or the square roots of the first 20 prime numbers. And that is really suited for certain types of kids. But if we want to teach computing and programming to all types of kids, we really need to broaden the joy to different kinds of kids. And at least for me, my joy in programming comes from copying and pasting things together and seeing, oh wow, this might work or it might not work. Let's try, run, and compile, and boom, it solved my problem and I made the computer obey my will, and that feels amazing. And that's joy, and that's play, and that's what I was after. So I tried to figure out who in the world knows plays best, and I went to Lego, and they had this wonderful chart about different motivations for a play. They talk about achievement-based motivation, social motivation, and immersion-based motivation. And for some reason, whenever we talk about playfulness in the educational system or gamification, we talk about this little column here. We talk about progress, we talk about power, we talk about optimization and challenging others and numbers and leaderboards, when in reality, everyone in this room who's ever programmed knows that there's so much more. There's the joy of helping each other. There's the joy of giving support to other people. There's the joy of exploring different possibilities of solving a problem and coming up with different solutions. And there's the joy of hiding from real-world problems and coming up with storylines and characters. And I think we should be embracing all of these different types of playfulness if we want to teach coding to all types of kids. The kids who learn by doing this, and the kids who learn by listening, and the kids who learn by reading, and embrace all of those different types of learning skills. And in chapter 4, we're going to look at a few different examples of this. In some of the workshops we do, we start by having this discussion about what is a computer, and I show kids these 4 pictures. I show them a picture of a car, a dog, a grocery store, and a toilet, and I ask them, which one of these, in your opinion, is a computer? And the kids, they look at me and they think, oh, she's not wise because none of this is a computer. Are you stupid? The computer is the glowing box in front of which mom or dad spends way too much time. But then we talk and we realize that, maybe a car is a computer because a car has a navigation system. And maybe a grocery store has different kinds of computers, like the ice cream box, something that keeps the ice cream from not melting, and the teller machine or the burglar alarm systems. And maybe a dog is not a computer, but maybe a dog's collar has a computer inside of it. And a lot of kids immediately suggest that, what if the car is the dog is a robot? And I'm like, yeah, a dog robot, that's really cool. How is it different from the machine? And then I tell the kids that in Japan, toilets are computers, and there's even hackers who hack them, and I'm always the most popular person among the 6-year-olds by this point. And then we move on, and I give them these little stickers with an on-off button on them. We are in a regular room with regular household appliances, and I tell them that, kids, for this afternoon alone, you have a magic ability to make anything in this room into a computer. And again, the kids object. They say, that's too hard. I don't know the right answer for this. And I tell them that, hey guys, neither does your mother or father. They've just heard about this thing called the Internet of Things or the IoT, But you guys are going to grow up in a world where your toothbrush is a computer, and your teddy bear is a computer, and your washing machine is a computer, and it's kind of up to you to design that world. So what we end up doing is the kids make little computers, and I had this little girl who took this bicycle lamp, and she came to me and said, "Hey Linda, this bicycle lamp could be a computer and it would change colors." And that's really good, but are you now really using all of the things a computer can be? And she goes back and she thinks, and then she comes back to me and very proudly tells, "Okay, if this bicycle lamp were a computer, we could go on a biking trip with my father. And then we could go sleep in a tent, and in the evening, this bicycle lamp could also be a movie projector." And that's the moment I'm looking for. The moment when the kid realizes 3 very profound things that us adults have a hard time understanding. First of them is, the world is not ready. We live in a world that is progressing all the time and getting better and better. The second thing is that technology is a really amazing way to make the world better, whether it's by doing business or doing art or doing sciences. And finally, that they themselves can be a part of that change. And the odds are that the little girl will not be the next Steve Wozniak or the inventor of the bicycle lamp movie projector. But for a moment there, she felt empowered and like that could be a career choice of hers. And that's what we should, as educators and parents and adults, guard in childhood. So how should we talk about computers and what they are for kids if computers are not the glowing boxes? It's really funny how the abstractions of computing and the models of computing we use come from 1945, where everything else in the world has changed, but the model we talk about when we talk about computers. Because you see, John von Neumann, he's a famous computer scientist, and he designed the von Neumann architecture in, I think, 1945, and it goes like this. Whenever kids ask me, so what is a computer if a computer is not the box anymore, I tell them, well, a computer is anything where you put in data, something happens to the data, and something new comes out. And what makes a computer so special is that it has memory, and it has 2 types of memory. The first type of memory is the memory that remembers the data that comes in and then what comes out. But the second type of memory is the special one, because that's the instructions on what to do with the data. That's called software, and programmers are ones who write the software. And that makes a computer so potential, because a tractor can be a tractor, and a pinball machine can be a pinball machine, but a computer can be anything based on what you decide to do with it. And at this point, kids usually are like, "Oh, you're talking too theoretical. Let's do something." So we build a computer, and the kids crawl into the computer, and there's little instructions for them, like come out crawling backwards, or come out crawling, jumping on one leg, and then the other kids need to decode what was the code that went inside of the computer. So they learn input, process, output, and eventually they run around the computer so much that it breaks. So that's that. The kids also get to draw what is inside of a computer in their opinion, and it's really fascinating to see how differently kids approach these things. So there's the linkers, the kids who understand computers as abstraction, as something, boxes that are somehow connected to one another, very adult thinking. There's the gear gurus who think that a computer has some sort of gears, something mechanical inside of it happening. And then there's my favorite ones, the drafters, the kids who understand that there's electricity inside of a computer, and that it's based on logic, not magic. It's based on different kinds of components talking to one another, and these kids are going to have a bright future. And finally, the kids get to build their own computer out of paper. They get to know the bossy CPU that gives instructions to all of the other components but has a hard time remembering anything. So it needs the help of the RAM and the ROM. And they look at where their summer vacation photos go to, and so forth and so forth. And then they design their first applications. And my favorite story of all time is this little boy whose favorite thing in the world is to be an astronaut. And the boy, he sits on the opposite side of the room with these huge headphones on. And his dad, really the astronaut in the lone Martian atmosphere, is on the opposite side of the room, and the boy is the mission control man, and he's designed an intergalactic planetary navigation application. And his role is to bring the father safely back from Mars to Earth. And I think these kids will have a profoundly different experience of what it is to create with technology and what it is to program and use the boring computer of the yesteryear. Almost final chapter. What does this mean for schools and educational systems? I think one of the very scary realities is that we've outsourced technology education to companies. I think especially the teachers in the room should reclaim technology education back to you, because we as technology people will come up with a gazillion different kinds of apps. And I'm not saying that screen time is evil or all of the time spent in front of a screen is bad. What I'm saying is that I bet many of the teachers here in the room have seen this list, like 50 new tools to teach you coding, or 20 new ways to use Google more effectively in your classroom. But these things lack depth. These are superficial solutions to very small skill sets. And I think we need the teacher's experiences and principles underlying. And the good news is that the whole history of computer science is full of multidisciplinary people. We needed biology, we needed physicists to come up with heating solutions. We needed material scientists to create transistors. We needed mathematicians, we needed philosophists, we needed graphic designers and sociologists to imagine the future where we are going to live in. And in my work, I feel like I'm most inspired by the work they did in the 70s, imagining the future of computing. And basically, Alan Kay in the 70s, he imagined the next iPad, like a hackable version for kids that they can open up, and he was considered totally lunatic at the time. And Alan Turing in the 50s, he started the discussion about the child machine, so the concept that a computer, instead of sort of cramming artificial intelligence into it, what if we raised computers as kids and taught them to learn, learning to learn being the key word. And then Seymour Papert and Cynthia Solomon have this wonderful paper about 20 things to do with computers that outlines 20 things you can do with computers to teach practical skills for a kid and creative things. So it's kind of very lately that we've had this mechanical and boring and sort of corporate view of what computer science education should look like, that is driven by the politicians and GDP growth and all these things that don't mean anything for your little students. I think it's almost time for us to realize what John Dewey dreamed of, having a classroom be the democratic world and raising kids for the society that have those experiences of building practical things. And when John Dewey lived, it wasn't possible to do this with technology. It was possible to do project-based work in humanities, but technology had to rely on abstractions and simulations and rhetoric and models. But now we're getting closer to the time where we can actually have kids build things with 3D printers and with programming and simulate things and concepts that are hard to see otherwise. And another example comes from the early 19th century with Montessori pedagogy that might be, I've heard that it's very popular here in Netherlands. Maria Montessori definitely understood something very profound about how kids learn and what's the best way of doing things. So what if we build our computer science curriculum around principles this deep and this broad? And final educational example is Reggio Emilia, the Italian schooling system that starts by saying that a child has 100 languages. They form their whole pedagogical thinking around a poem, and the poem says that a child has 100 languages and 100 ways of exploring things, but we adults say that there's one way of thinking and one way of solving problems. And Reggio thinks that sculpting and painting and singing and math, they are all ways of children's languages, and I'm thinking coding might be one of those languages for the future too. So what should this look like in classroom then? What can we design if we decide to take these approaches that the pedagogicians in the room recognize so well, but as technologists don't necessarily always know? I think we could be teaching kids programming through phenomenon-based learning. We could be teaching them in context and showing them real-world examples of how the things they are doing affect their world. And say if we're teaching them recycling, we could start by talking about what is recycling, but we could move then on and think about, okay, so how it's going to affect the world if computers help us recycle things. And that's a very natural pathway into learning about different kinds of sorting algorithms and different kind of data structures and so forth and so forth, when you give context and when you give meaning for the kids. Finally, I think less and less I'm trying to teach kids about programming, because programming is just one tool to solve a problem. It's a really important and a really big tool, but more and more I feel like we are teaching and preparing kids for a world where everything around them will be a computer, and understanding that technology is part of us. It doesn't belong to someone else. There's no binary world where you need to be a technology person or a non-technology person is one of the key things. We need nurses who understand the power of computers. We need policemen who code. We need biologists who understand data structures, and so forth and so forth. Final chapter, and one of the biggest sentences in the history of children's literature. And the best advices in life that I've gotten from C.S. Lewis: when you're faced with a problem, begin from the beginning and keep going until you hit the end. And that's that. I think the more approachable and fun and exciting and context-driven we make the world of technology, the better world we'll have. And technology inherently is built on humanity. The first computers in the world were humans who were calculating things. It used to be a profession to be called a computer. And technology, it doesn't include only the tools to solve a problem. It also includes the attitudes and skills and mindsets, all very human things. And I think the biggest barrier for this world is us adults. Because when you talk with kids, they get this stuff already. I talked with 9-year-olds. I asked 150 of them, what is technology? Who uses it, and what is it used for? And this is one of the answers I got. This is a 9-year-old girl who said, technology is electricity that loves. That was her definition of technology. Electricity that loves. And she keeps going and says that we use technology with mom, with WhatsApp, and technology used for play, and people uses technology. And that makes me really optimistic about the future. I'm not scared about artificial intelligence or robots taking over the world, because I feel like I have power over them because people use this technology. So imagine with me a world where the tiny Ada Lovelaces of the future feel empowered to drive this change. A world where the 20-something-year-olds of the Silicon Valley bubble don't decide what kind of problems should progress and get better and be solved. A world of technology that is wonderful and whimsical and a little bit weird. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, so far for your wonderful presentation. Have a seat. I'm going to pour you a bit of water as well.
Boom. Oh, I'm on time. Wow. I felt bad for you. I didn't remember to tell you that I speak really fast most of the time. So even though I would speed up, I'm not out of breath very easily. So if anyone was like, oh, she's going to faint, no worries.
Let me skip to the Q&A. A lot of information has passed in the past 30 minutes. And as I said at the beginning of the evening, for the people who already know a lot about programming, they'll have to indulge me for asking the first few questions that I'm going to ask you, because these are really for the beginners among us, and I'm watching at home. I myself am a beginner
Me too.
at this stuff. And this is going to seem really redundant, the first question, but could you be very precise, what is programming?
Programming is giving step-by-step instructions to computers to solve a problem. And computers are funny because they need very clear instructions. They need instructions in the right order. You need to specify everything to a computer. So if we were to play a little bit and I would be a computer and you would need to program me to raise that glass of water, could you do that?
No, right here,
yes,
right now?
Right now, yes.
Reach for the glass? Okay, yeah. Take your hand out horizontally, and then go down vertically now.
You forget to stop me all the time. There's a loop happening here.
Right, yeah.
So, but you get the point. So
yes.
You need to be very, very, very careful when giving instructions, very precise, right order. But the good news is that programming has changed a lot in the past past 30 years. So if there's people in the audience who've done programming in the 80s or the 70s, you needed to give all of these instructions. The abstraction level was very low, so you needed to be like walk to the or like reach your hand towards the glass, stop when you reach the glass. Nowadays, programming abstraction level has gotten higher, and in modern programming languages, you could kind of say that drink up the glass, and there would be thousands and thousands of lines of code that would define what a glass means and what reaching means and so forth. So it's gotten easier.
Has it evolved to become easier, or?
Yeah, I think programmers are inherently very lazy, so they don't want to repeat things, and that's why they use the power of computers. So programmers stand on the the shoulders of giants, and really like that's allowed this industry to happen and change so rapidly.
What's the difference between coding and programming?
I don't think there's a difference.
That's the same thing?
That's pretty much the same thing, yeah.
Okay. What is computational thinking?
So computational thinking is a wonderful word that I think it has like a longer history, but I ran into it a few years ago. And computational thinking means problem-solving strategies that help a human formulate a problem into a way that a computer can understand it. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit further. So a computer, not like a human does computational thinking, it's a human strategy, and it involves things like pattern recognition skills, the art of abstraction, being able to tell that here's like 10 different kinds of cats, the name for all of these things is a mammal, stuff like that. It involves algorithmic thinking, being able to structure a problem in a step-by-step sequence, and decomposition, pattern recognition skills, algorithmic thinking, and abstraction. So those kinds of things, strategies that for the people in the audience who are not programmers, they're like, those are basic problem-solving skills that I learned in math class, and you're absolutely right. It's just using the computer's power to solve those problems.
And is it important to, in your opinion, learn this stuff as a part of the broader educational that you get in school?
Paramount, I think. Educational systems are some of the best spreaders of democracy and skills. And if we believe that parents or like grandparents will have the time to teach these things, only the kids with parents in technology will learn these things. So I think it's very important to teach these things. And if the goal of schooling systems is to prepare the kids for a future where many different things can happen, I think computers unanimously will belong to those futures.
We're going to elaborate a little bit more on that later in the conversation. You mentioned before you made the Hello Ruby book, you mentioned the Rails Girls community. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So that was really born out of the same frustration I had with learning computer science in schools. It was very much theory-driven, very boring, very sort of focused on intellectual exercises, and I wanted a community where we would focus on beginners, because I was a beginner at the time, and still consider myself to be. That would be a community where you would build something quickly and sort of show what you can create with a computer. So Rails Girls was born in Helsinki. It's a weekend workshop to teach your first experience in software craftsmanship. So we build a Pinterest type of an application with Rails, which is a framework programmers who build web applications oftentimes use. And it has a lot of goals. It has the goal of showing, to say, young girls in Azerbaijan that, hey, there's other young girls who are equally excited about this thing. They might have never met another woman who's excited about technology. It's about showing the existing Ruby community, our Rails community, to those participants and building those connections. And it's about raising questions and showing that it's not magic or incomprehensible.
And it's still running?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah?
Yeah, it's Middle East, it's US. I consider myself to be like the chief cheerleader of Rails Girls. So whenever there's a new chapter popping up, I kind of try to introduce them to one another. And
can anybody anywhere start a chapter?
So it's completely open sourced. Anyone can start it. And one of the important things we realized when building this community was that in addition to the curriculum, like the things that you do inside of a workshop, we included instructions on like how do you communicate about these things. We have posters and we have all of this like other meta level stuff that sometimes programmers who are very problem solution centric tend to forget.
Okay. And did you come up with the idea for Hello Ruby after Rails Girls, or was
It's
that around
kind
the
of-
same time?
It's very like fluffy. It was
Intertwined.
roughly the same time. I was teaching myself Ruby code, and so Ruby is a programming language also. And every time I would run into something that I can't understand, like, and programming is so full of like acronyms and jargon, like what is garbage collection or what is object-oriented programming, I would try to explain it to myself in a way that a 6-year-old girl would see the thing. And then the project kind of started to evolve from there, but the first iterations were really like my own snarky commentary to the technology world. So whenever I would run into something, some phenomenon in the tech world, I would try to imagine it as a character. So for instance, Apple, the company in my imagination became Snow Leopard, who's really beautiful but a little bit snobbish and doesn't want to play with the other kids and is in this little garden. And then Google as a company, on the other hand, would be like a robot who's really messy and grows up way too fast but wants to hug everyone to death, maybe. and my mom would be like, "Oh, Linda, like, are you writing a Soviet propaganda book for kids?" But it was a big process of discovery, and I still feel it's underway. I might add more identities to the list.
You've already spoken a little bit about the exercises in the book. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more of, let's say, a mother or father would buy the Dutch translation, which is out now, for their 6-year-old girl or son. What kind of journey would they go on with Ruby? Could you tell a little bit concretely
more about that? It really
more
depends
about
on the kid. I don't, like, if the parent has the idea that I'll buy this book and my kid becomes a programmer, I'm really sorry, but you will be disappointed. I think it's about the level of the kid and what they find interesting. So some kids will just read the storybook part and be like, "Oh wow, this was a fun or boring or whatever bedtime story." What I wish to see is that the kids would later in life, they maybe recognize that, "Oh wow, this character or this joke here was actually about this phenomenon happening in the real world," or this exercise where we practiced Boolean logic, for instance, without actually knowing that it's Boolean logic. Maybe they'll realize in university that, wow, like what I was actually learning here was Boolean logic. So those kinds of things. And it's all very open-ended. There's very few right or wrong answers. It's about creativity and exploration and trying new things. And the parents in the room who are like, "Oh, I don't know anything about technology," we've made like tiny toolboxes for you. So there's the adult level language included also.
Yeah, because I was curious about that too, because I mean, children are growing up now with technology around them as a given, basically. Is it educational for parents, or maybe for even teachers as well?
Yeah, I think there's been many parents who've learned many things, and the like outreach and the pouring support from the teacher community has been one of the greatest surprises for me, because I wrote this book to be worked together with a parent, and I had this idea of like, and I don't have kids of my own yet, so this idealistic vision of a parent and a kid working together and so forth. But in reality, it's been the teachers who've been most enthusiastic about the book.
Great. Now we're talking about the educational context. I'd like to ask Remco Pijpers to join us as well for the conversation. You can definitely give him a hand. Remco, first of all, your role at Kennisnet, you are a strategic advisor. Could you maybe briefly tell for the people who don't know Kennisnet yet, what Kennisnet does and what your role is at Kennisnet?
Kennisnet is a semi-public organization helping schools with ICT. And so it's public funded, not a commercial organization. And, I'm one of the people helping schools with their digital skills, how to integrate that in your education.
Okay. And one of the reasons that I asked you here is a couple of years ago, I think you've written a book of you put together a book on positive digital content for kids.
Yeah, we've met before. Linda was in a book.
Well, yeah,
I co-authored. Yeah.
Yeah, you've made a portrait about Linda. What
2 years ago.
What made
when
you?
I was like smack middle of the Kickstarter disaster, and then when I went through the book, I was like, wow, because oftentimes when you talk about positive digital content for kids, it's boring content. It's like super strictly like it's written by parents who want really boring content for their kids, and I was so surprised and happily
What was the original motivation to do a
That
portrait
was
on
another
women?
project I worked on for the European Commission. I was in a advisory board, on how to create more digital positive content for children, instead of only looking at safe use of the internet. So we portrayed the champions, and we had Tokaboka, BBC, we went everywhere in Europe. And Linda was an example of someone new in town, setting up from nothing. And so the portrait was a story about how to create a dream and build it. And she's also an example for many newbies that have dreams, how to fulfill a dream, and she did it. So.
And as an advisor, you advise schools in how to integrate technology in their schools, or ICT in their schools. Do you have direct connections with the teachers or the school leaders, or is it on a board level? How does that work?
We mainly work with boards and school leaders, but we have a lot of contact with teachers as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the most common need for schools when it comes to technology? Is there a problem or a question that gets asked most?
Well, all schools are now in the phase of going digital already for a very long time, but it's getting more and more complex. It's very difficult to make the right choices. It's expensive, and you might make mistakes. And on top of that, the discussion now is really what children have to learn. Also about digital things.
Right.
What should they all learn to program, or should they be media literate? We have had a discussion in the Netherlands a lot about what the core activity should be on this topic, and we still haven't finished this discussion.
And are there a lot of teachers who are themselves already into programming, or have the knowledge about computer science?
Well, I think the leaders in primary education are women. Women do the most fantastic things on schools, and the few men working in primary education are mainly occupied with hardware and cool stuff, drones, etc. And women are busy with stories and coming up with beautiful ideas, and they combine technology with live interactions. So when you have a look on television, public debates are very economic, that all children should learn to program, and we need those children to do the right studies so we can have more employees doing the right thing.
Right.
But
just from an economic perspective.
Yeah, but if you talk to teachers, women mainly, they are also busy with how can I use technology in the classroom? How do I talk to my pupils about technology in life? And I think it's very important that we support those teachers to have not only focus on the economic part, but also on the other part.
Linda, is learning how to program, in your perspective, as important to learn a language?
I think it's the wrong way to pose the question altogether.
What would be the right way?
I think it's what kind of skills do the kids need in order to live in a world where more and more of the things around them are turning into computers. And I think language is definitely one skill that they need, because a programmer writes code for the computer to compile, but really the programmer writes code for the other programmer to read and comment and write. And rarely are programming projects anymore these lone cowboys that are working on the code alone. It's a very multidisciplinary and people involved thing, that you create these cathedrals of code that become more massive, and it requires a lot of communication skills. So if we have kids who can't speak to one another but can code, we'll have a horrible society.
This is going to be difficult. Yeah, it's going to be a problem. Is that, I mean, since I am a novice at this, is this a question that you sometimes hear in schools? You know,
What question?
Well, the question that is programming as a skill as important as learning a language, but that's probably maybe the wrong approach to the problem. How does that work in the questions that you get from schools? Are they
Do they think children should learn to program?
Yeah, are they putting digital competency already as important next to languages and learning math and so forth?
No, not at all. But I think schools are. I think everyone in the Dutch education system is busy with the question: what skills do we have to teach our children? And they all see children with mobile phones, playing games on computers, being very common with everything, and teachers sometimes just feel incompetent, and everyone has the feeling things have to change, and they want to be future-proof, but don't know exactly how to manage that, how to fill that in.
How to organize it, yeah.
Yeah, do you really have to program, or should it be a broader thing, computational thinking? What about media literacy, information literacy? We have a very good tradition in the Netherlands concerning media literacy, and is coding part of that? Or so now we have the National Institute of Development for Curriculum this year, defining a lot of skills, and that is what schools need to know what to do, because we have a lot of different definitions what coding is, programming is, and in England they have a way of bringing it to schools, very much about computing. But in Australia it's more integrated with other subjects. And in the Netherlands, right now we're building this new curriculum.
It's an ongoing discussion about how to organize it best.
Well, sometimes some people think that Dutch schools are very slow, but I just think it's good to take the time and think it through.
Right. Linda, where does design come into programming? Is it from the very start? Because you speak a lot about imagination, sparking kids' imagination and stimulating their creative capacities. Does design come at the very start when you learn how to program, or does that come later in the process?
If we think about programming as a highly creative profession where you solve problems, we can think that there's many ways to solve a problem. And then, of course, if we want to use design as a word to describe that process of thinking that, I want to code an app for events, so I have here the events, and then I have the participants, and then maybe the participants have people who come with them, and how do I structure this problem in a way that it makes sense for a computer? Then definitely design comes in at the very early stages of programming.
Because I'm very interested in if there is an ethical side to programming as well. A couple of weeks ago, we had a different speaker here on ethical design, literally. I have a short clip that I want to show you and show the audience, and then I'm going to ask you another question as well. Let's see if this works.
Today, everything from your smart appliances, your smart televisions in your living room, to the things that we wear, to the vehicles that we drive in or that drive us to places soon, gather data, information, personal information about us. If I have enough information about you, I can simulate you. Who owns and controls this data? That's the important question here. If this personal information about you is owned and controlled by you, then we have a democracy. But if this personal information and data about you is controlled by corporations and by extension shared with government agencies, then we have a very different type of society. We have a very different system. We have a corporatocracy.
In your opinion, from your perspective...
From a storyteller's and children's book author's perspective.
Yes, it's going to be a little bit more heavy and political now. Because I think there's an important educational aspect to this. If we educate children to become critical, democratic citizens, do programmers have an obligation or a responsibility to think about the possible consequences of, or the effects of, the things that they make, the things that they do with technology?
So I'm going to be horrible and sort of mirror the question back, like, does humankind have an obligation to assess the like effects of their actions? And the answer is of course. And I think programmers are not some mindless machines that just bang out code. Of course, there's ethical implications, and we need to be very sort of careful when making things. And I think the point you made about like changes in educational systems, if you had asked me the same question 2 years ago, I would have been very gung-ho about like, yes, let's change everything, and being immediately coding into the curriculum and boom, boom, boom. The older I've grown, the more I've started to realize that it's actually really good that society has these structures in place that force us to deliberately like contemplate and discuss and have many different people take a part of the discussion. And that's where the question of definitions and vocabulary and sort of a joint discussion where everyone can participate comes in.
Yeah, because you've spoken at the in the presentation, you said something about that teachers should take the ownership back from companies who are now, making the educational material. Yeah. How could they do that? How could they?
By embracing the 6-year-old inside of them and asking like why and what and what if and how and all the questions, because technology, like, well, a good example from the Finnish educational system is one global phenomenon that has embraced the whole earth in recent years. And when I was in school, it was taught as the greenhouse effect. And that's what teachers thought. And now in the Finnish educational systems, teachers who, mind you, don't have a PhD in physics, don't have a PhD in social sciences, but have 5 years of master's education, they teach greenhouse effect to kids, this whole complex, multiple solution like thing. They teach it in physics class of like how it works and what it actually does. They teach in social sciences class like how human populations move because of the effects of the greenhouse effects. And when I see teachers who say that, oh, I can teach how computers work for kids, like I don't understand this thing, I'm like, yeah, you do. Like you don't just, well, not lazy, but you're scared for nothing. And at the level that the kid needs to understand these things, a teacher can learn them, definitely. It's not intellectually too hard or too demanding. If you can teach global warming to kids, you can definitely do this.
But maybe it takes stepping out of your comfort zone.
It takes that, and it takes support from the people who surround you, so from the governments and from other teachers and from the companies also.
Mm-hmm. What's your take on the ethical dimension of technology in education?
Well, in general, I think it's a media literate thing. I just read an interview with Chomsky, the famous intellectual in Vrij Nederland, who says that every citizen already at a very young age has to learn a self-defense, intellectual self-defense, take a course, just how to learn how you are manipulated and how people try to take you over. So I'm not sure if coding alone is enough to learn how you are manipulated all day. But to me, that's the ethical side.
Can I tell my example?
Yeah, of course.
So we have this exercise with kids where they start by having these little pieces of paper where they write data points on each piece of paper. Like, I'm a girl and I'm 5 years old and I come from Helsinki and I like ponies. And then they put these pieces of paper on clothespins to their clothes. And we do like a giant tag your it game where some of the kids are assigned roles, and the roles are Facebook, Google and Amazon. And they try to run around the kids and like snatch all of the data from them. And you lose when you lose all of your data. So there's a little bit of privacy in there. But then the next step of this game is a game where all of the data is gathered into a pile and all of the kids choose different colored papers and they get some sort of a persona. And the next step is we give them the front page of New York Times or Helsingin Sanomat or whatever media outlet that is big in their country, and we block certain elements from there, like white it out, like the title and certain images and certain advertisements, and then they need to redesign that page to sort of make it appealing for the persona that they've created to click on links. And then we have a really interesting discussion about, is it ethical that algorithms decide like how and what we get to see, and what is good about it and what is bad about it? And the funny thing is, 6-year-olds understand the concept of this and can have a more intellectual like discussion about this than my mom. Sorry, mom. Still like is, why does Facebook know that like when I looked at this dress on Zalando, like how does it show the same dress for me here? And I think that's the discussion.
Philosophy, you have philosophy discussion.
Yeah, and also understanding the underlying principles that yes, Facebook spies on us all the time, and Zalando offers the data for them because they get people to buy back, and those sort of invisible forces around that are driven by computers and algorithms are something that we should surf.
But that shows that you also plea for a broader set of competences, not only coding, but everything around digital skills. Yeah,
exactly. Do the kids act on it as well when they learn this? Do they stop using Facebook?
Kids are not allowed to use Facebook. these are 7-year-olds, so no Facebook for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think so far privacy has been an issue that we are not ready to pay for, so that's why it's not offered. But we'll see.
I wondered that I read about a research done in America about the reading culture in Finland, that you have a very strong economy. Mm-hmm. Some people say, and that your reading culture is very strong. That you're in Europe the first, top 5
PISA,
in reading with children.
Yeah.
And how do you relate that to coding? You combine literature with programming.
So I think there's some great things about. Oh wow, this became like. There's some great things about the Finnish educational system. So we are a small country. We're 5 million people, and in 70s the reform stated that in order to survive as a country, we need to equally raise everyone up, and that gave birth to the current primary school system. And it means Finnish teachers are. All of them, even the primary school teachers, even the kindergarten teachers, have 5 years of university studies behind them. They are very motivated. They are respected by the society. Being a teacher is very respected in our society. It's not very well paid, but you get a lot of support. And Finnish teachers have an enormous amount of autonomy over their classes. So, for instance, the system you described that works in UK, where it's very assessment-based, where it's very much standardized what you teach, that would be a horrible disaster in Finland, where teachers are used to being given a task like, okay, teach algorithms to kids, and then a few examples, and then they themselves decide what to do inside of the classroom. And I think that has been sort of the success of the Finnish schooling system.
But the Finnish chose for literature, is my impression.
Finnish literature, yeah, sure, but I think it's more about the things we value and the principles behind them, and then the literature is kind of cause, or the effect, and the cause is the fact that the educational system is so strong. And that's when people ask me, okay, so what kind of curriculum should we design for our school here in Netherlands or here in Japan? I can't give an answer because education is so highly cultural, and it's the value system you have behind your education that
it has to be organized to local context.
Exactly. So, yeah.
It's time for the audience. If you have any questions, I see already somebody in the back. Could you stand up, please? What's your name?
I'm Hester IJsseling. I'm a teacher here in Amsterdam, primary school teacher. I had many questions, so I have to choose one, I think. You said somewhere in your talk, thank you for your talk, people use technology, and you made it sound like we're in control. And I was wondering, a lot of technology is about saving time. And the world has changed through technology. We used to plow the fields with horses, and we used to write books on typewriters, and we used to communicate through letters, and it took more time. And we invented things to do them faster. And at the same time, we don't experience that we have saved a lot of time. Nobody has any time. more than 100 years ago, maybe even less. So I was wondering, how true is it that we use technology, and to what extent does technology change us without our being in control, as you seem to suggest? And very quickly, very shortly, I want to ask the other questions. You said the world will be a world where everything is a computer. I was wondering what you mean with everything. And I was wondering whether you would say that you can think everything through computational thinking. Can everything be thought computationally?
Those are 3 questions, I think.
Yeah, I'm making notes here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first one. Are we the masters of technology? Do we use technology or does it use us?
I think we're scared of things we don't know, and that's the beauty of teaching kids how technology works. We're scared of artificial intelligence and the Terminator that comes and kills us. And when you understand how computers work, you understand that it's a sequence of switches that are on and off and electricity that goes, and it's built on abstractions on top of one another, and you have control over the things. And I know still fairly little about technology, but already now I feel like I can solve problems that I have in the world. Say, for instance, I like gardening, or I've grown really to like gardening, and I had all of these different seeds in front of me, and they require different times you put them into the ground, or you like pre-grow them inside, and they were 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and in April and May, and I looked at them and I felt, this is a database problem, and this is an interface problem. And then I made a little app where I can choose, like, this year I want to bake tomatoes and basil and radishes, and it prints me out a list that, hey, in like March you need to do this and that and so forth. And that's a very tiny problem, but it shows that I had the problem and I'm in control and I'm coming up with the solution. That being said, I think there's a lot of things people who love technology don't consider. The whole discussion about, I don't know, what's the moment when computers gain consciousness, the singularity and all of those things. I think the one panacea we can have is to have a discussion where we involve more different kinds of people, so that it's not only the computer scientists who get to make the choices, but everyone.
It's important to have a very diverse group of people who think about this stuff.
But a shared vocabulary for that diverse group, because if one person is talking about neural networks and the other person is thinking about, oh, that must be like something you had for breakfast, it's like the discussion doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, so we need a philosopher,
yes,
and a programmer, and a sociologist, and so forth. I believe the second question was...
everything is a computing.
Yes, what do you mean by everything?
Everything is a computer. What I mean with that is that when you think about a physicist studies the phenomena of the physical world, and a biologist studies the phenomena of the biological world. And when you meet a computer scientist, the immediate idea behind people is that, oh, a computer scientist studies the computer, like the computer is the computer scientist's field. But in reality, what's happening is a computer scientist or an engineer or a developer or a programmer uses the computer to solve problems in the real world. And more the problems in the real world are turning into computer problems, say energy and health and education and all these like big hairy problems that humans can't solve anymore on their own, but they require the assistance of computers. And everything turning into a computer means that first the problems we're facing are computer problems that require us humans as very integral components to solve them, because we need the creativity and the like solutions humans have. But second of all, it means that more and more of the things in our world are turning into software. So we used to have CDs, now we have Spotify. We used to have like DVDs, now we have Netflix. We used to pay with cash, so soon we'll have like mobile pay, Apple Pay, things like this. So more and more we are vouching for the convenience and the fastness of solutions, and things are turning into software. And it's just a really scary future where it's only the 20-something-year-old Silicon Valley boys who like decide on what things in world are worth getting better at and worth progressing. So.
Yeah, but they're now, I know in Amsterdam there's this Startup Delta project. Mm-hmm. They're trying to become in some sort of way, the Silicon Valley of
I
Europe.
I understand that, and I think it's
Startup
important
ecosystem.
that that's important, but it's still driven by profit. Like startups
is.
there to make a profit, and what I mean is that our governments should have equally good hackers as Uber has. Our like non-profits should have people who understand data analytics as well as Google does, and that's what I mean, that we need a more diverse set of people.
Yeah, exactly. We should. I mean, shouldn't Amsterdam build an ecosystem for startups that is like Silicon Valley 2.0, where psychologists, philosophers think about what
And
this
that's what
ecosystem
Europe
should-
is about. That's
Right.
what the depth of and culture of Europe has always been about, understanding humans. And I think that's what our technology culture should also reflect.
Right. And the third question was, can you think about everything in a computational way?
So we had this interesting discussion on dinner the other day where so this time I'm going to step out of the storyteller's form and reflect to research that's been done. So definitely computer science teaches you different thinking structures and you start to approach problems differently. But it still remains to be seen if it actually affects your problem-solving skills in the rest of the world. So, for instance, understanding the concept of different kinds of data structures, like ordering things in different ways. Does it affect the way you fill your school bag? Like, do you understand that you should put the things that you use least to the bottom and the things that you should use most to the top? So there's been research about this around the computational thinking community, but they haven't reached yet a cohesive argument about this. So
Okay.
we'll see. So many questions.
No, hold on. You've had 3 questions. I'm going to go to the next one.
Hi, I'm Axel Roest. I'm a developer for 25 years, and I'm also teaching now, but to senior level people. Coding, actually. I have a question for Mevrouw Kramer from Kennisnet. Remco, sorry.
Yep.
I visited schools, primary schools, in the last couple of months for my daughter, and they have lots of computers everywhere. But the only thing they use it for is repetitive training, like grammar and calculating stuff and looking stuff up. So it's like the internet. But is there any effort being made in the Netherlands, like they do in England, to actually teach coding? And to teach algorithmic thinking and to solve puzzles and use Logo or whatever. There is Scratch. I know there's Codeuur, but it's all voluntary based, and the school can rent a teacher for an hour on a Friday. It's not really structural. Is Kennisnet in any way involved in enhancing the codability of our kids?
We just had Paul Snabel. I'm not sure if you know him. He advised the government to have digital skills in the curriculum. So at the end of this year, we know how that will look like. But it's broader than only coding, and it's coding. No. I think more and more schools, they really want. You have a group of schools. Some of them are present. Maybe it's wise to ask them to tell them what they do.
Anybody
there will
from
be
the audience who wants to
a leerlijn
react?
programmeer so very soon.
Liukas, I think you were one of the first to react.
I got angry. No, we're just realizing we have a problem here in the Netherlands. So
What's the problem?
that we don't know how to react on a digitizing world, and we don't know how to use the beauty and joy and power of computing to empower children and have new ways to express themselves and exploit their imagination. And
Well, I must say
a
that
lot of reaction in the audience.
Well, at this point, I mean, as a Fab Lab kind of system, I'm in a primary school, and the luck with the school that I am having now is they cooperate now with colleges, and also, I'm sorry, it's the PABO. Teacher College.
Yeah.
Teacher College. And they are now really looking together for what they have to do with new technology, like indeed programming, or even like digital designing for 3D printing and stuff like that. So there is a movement going on right now that they're trying to make these kind of curriculum, so to speak.
Well, I think things are changing. It's really, some people feel it goes too slow, but I speak to a lot of schools, school boards, who before said they didn't want to do anything with media literacy. They felt it as an obligation, and now suddenly I speak to a lot of board people responsible for 50, 60 schools. They want to have coding, computational skills in their vision, and ask me how to implement it for 60 schools. So I really think there is a movement going on, but the only aching there is that some people wanted to go very fast, and schools, they don't go fast. They wanted to do their own slow way, and in England you see that computing, we have a coding curriculum there, but teachers, they don't go along. So you have a lot of money, you have a lot of companies, the government is very decisive in telling everyone what to learn, to teach to children. But now we are 1 year ahead, further, and a lot of teachers, they don't go along. They have the money, they have the materials, but they don't do it. And they just found out that it's very much about framing. If you tell teachers they have to learn how to code, they get scared. And now they realize more and more that coding is not the same as computing. In England, computing is more than programming. It's about playing games and learning how to think, and now more and more teachers realize it's easier than we thought. So it's about bringing two perspectives together.
Right, and it's very much a matter of language as well.
I think the way you do it is I think it will be very appealing to schools.
We're going to Mr. at the back for a question.
Yes, my name is Menno, and I was wondering, how do we get those teachers who don't see the urgency to come along with the technological evolution? How do we get them to that point where we can change, we can make a change?
Linda, could you answer
So,
that?
2 answers. One of them is politically correct and one of them is incorrect. First one is UK has a wonderful system of master teachers and sort of apprentice teachers, where they train one teacher in the school who's really enthusiastic and sort of glows with energy, and that person is kind of responsible for A, like infecting the others, and B, taking care of the computing classes at the time. And we're trying something similar in Finland. The politically incorrect answer is that we wait for them to retire. And we affect the whole generation of teacher trainers who won't have questions about this, who demand that this is like a thing. But that's a really slow way to go also.
Are there in Finland, and I'm going to ask the same question for you, Remco, I'm not sure if you know, and I'm not sure if you know about Finland, but do the teacher colleges in Finland pick this up? Do they take it into their curriculum?
Yes, because and that's where I see the decisiveness of government or like school boards as a really important role, because when it's in the curriculum, it gets executed, it gets money, it gets recognition, and we decided 2 years ago to implement coding across the curriculum starting from the age 7 until the age 14 or 15. And now there's a budget for it, and it really makes a big difference for the teachers, like everyday life, that they can teach and learn these things. And it's implemented also into the teacher training.
Okay.
The big question is kind of how well it's done, but we'll know when we see the results. This has never ever been done. Like UK is the first one who's actually teaching a whole generation of kids coding, and we're just learning things.
Right.
Well, I think that England is the wrong example for the Netherlands. I think it's better to look at Australia, where they have a different approach. Whereas in the Netherlands, we really look at England as the great example. Whereas in Australia, they do the same thing, but in a different way. I think that suits our country more.
What's the difference precisely?
Well, they have computing as an important part of their curriculum as well, but they have more general skills.
Okay.
And computing is attached to all those general skills instead of computing as an almost
As a
separate subject.
Yeah, right. Okay. Mr. over here, and then I'm going to come to the Mr. over there.
Hi, I'm Sjoerd Dirk. I'm self-employed on computer programming in primary school education, and I'm also a primary school teacher. I want to respond to Remco. You said that to get it into education, it takes a long time. I think I agree on that, but it's 2016. Aren't we late? Didn't we have to start 10, 20 years ago?
Maybe, yeah, probably. But if you look at England, UK, they created a fundament first, and then they implemented everything. And now we're late. But it doesn't mean that you have to. You can't can impose coding.
Better late than never.
Sorry.
Better late than never.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in England also, I know that many schools, even though it's an obligation to teach coding, etc., in schools, there are many schools who don't do that at the moment because they're even with the system of master teachers and apprentices, it's still not working on all the schools. And I don't think it's something from the last couple of years, but we had to start 20, 30 years ago thinking about this, and
we did, but then we stopped. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the day we haven't invented the time machine
But somehow
yet.
I think we have to find
someday.
We have to find a way to listen to schools more, to listen to teachers. That there are a lot of teachers that really want to. But what we do now, what companies do now, they bombard schools with materials and courses, all for profit. And schools, they ask us what to do, where to go to. And then you get mixed up schools that stand still because they don't know what to do.
Okay, sir, next question.
Yeah, well, the question I want to ask is basically very simple. It's related to the other questions that have been asked before. First of all, I think the problem with teaching children in the Netherlands is that the fact that the teachers don't themselves understand the whole subject as a whole in order to be able to teach it to children. So what are we going, or what is this program going to change about that? It's like teach the teacher instead of the other way around, the teacher teaching the children.
We have a very good teacher there, Sandra. She's an expert.
So who's going to educate the teachers? Because the teachers need to understand the subject in order to be able to teach it. And my experience as a programmer, and I work in education, is most teachers don't even know how their telephone works. So
I don't agree. I think you have a lot of different teachers, very skilled, loads of good teachers, doing great. Like the maker movement is gaining, for example, right now. You have a lot of teachers being very good at it. And I think it's better to look at, like Sandra, for example, who's doing a lot of great work, what we can learn from them and how can we help them helping their colleagues.
And as we motivate children, we can motivate teachers as well? Is that?
Probably a little bit different motivation structures, 6-year-olds and adults, but
obviously,
yes.
But
agreed. Maybe it starts from understanding the teacher's motivations and what are the questions they have about what, like understanding the whole subject that is. But I must say, I feel still like that there's so much that I don't understand about computer science. Like I have a list of things that I don't know, and I keep on going back to the list and being like, yeah, I should study more data structures in order to be like good at this. So it's part of also the field of technology that it's always changing, and somehow maybe it's teaching resilience, or maybe it's teaching like learning skills or something like that, because I think you'll never be able to master things in a way that you're like, okay, now I know everything.
We have just a few minutes left, and we have some questions left. I'm going to start with you, then sir, lady, and Mr. Sorry, mag ik even langs? Ja. Last 4 questions. Sir.
Maybe I can keep the 4 to add an answer, actually, instead of a question, my personal answer for something. Actually, one of the anecdotes from my life has something to do with one of the first questions about can everything be thought of computationally? computationally. Yeah, I did sleep a little bit, not so good
No
last
worries.
night, so I'm a little bit trembling. But I'm a programmer for my day job, and one of the big things I learned is that you have, if you want to have time for things, then you have to, when you have a problem, go back to roots. Not solve this thing that is on the top, because then you have to solve 10 things. If you go down a little bit into the problem and see the root cause of things, you only have to solve maybe one, and you have solved 10 and maybe even 100 others.
Is that exactly, Linda, what you said about sometimes a big problem or something that can seem as a big problem is actually just a few problems? Yeah? Okay.
The relation with the one of the first questions, can everything be thought of computationally? For me, that triggered. And also the slide with all the blocks of algorithms, decomposition, I'm not sure what exactly was there, but I think we shouldn't discuss what Australia does or England, but see what actually that question is. That question suggests that probably computation is something universal. For me, it says that learning something about computation is learning something about logic and then how people think and how people think that the universe works.
Start at the fundamentals, at the basics. Yeah.
Yes, but also to be able to solve more problems, like if somebody is talking to me and I get angry, why did I get angry? Can I maybe select a thing we share to get out of the angry zone? It's, I think it's very universal. And
Right.
I think that's why I get a little bit agitated about this. Guys, let's talk about a real problem. We have a gap in education, teaching children how to think, maybe.
Would Linda or Remco like to respond?
You can.
I think the education system gives you tools to think about, or subjects to think about, whereas we should give them tools to think with. And computer science definitely gave me tools to think about the world, whereas my puny business degree gave me nothing. So yeah, I totally agree that it's about instruction. I just started to think about wow, wouldn't it be great if AR or something was in a situation where I could see what's bothering you and I could just think. And, yeah, but let's go to the questions.
Next question.
Yeah. Good evening. Thanks for the inspiring talk. I'm thinking a lot this evening, but the first thing I wanted to share is that we all are kind of believers here. We seem all to be kind of believers that coding or programming, you don't even make the difference, is something that all the children need to learn. Then you seem to think that even all the artists and philosophers and gardeners have to learn coding and programming, because then they will be able to solve their problems better or be able to talk to other people who are working with computers. But then I don't really understand, because we have been living as artists and philosophers. Well, you have to learn to think well. Logic is important, and ethics are important. So what is exactly really the need that we all have to learn to code?
I would argue that everyone doesn't need to learn to code. I would argue that everyone needs to learn to think in a way that a computer can understand. And the idea behind that is that our world is so surrounded by software and code that it would almost feel like we would say to a certain group of people that no, you don't need to learn English at all. You can just get along with Dutch and let the business people do the English talking, or let the developers do the English talking. I don't think we will have people who become pure programmers. There will be those people too, but more and more people just not being scared about computers. And I really wait for the future where artists and philosophers start to harness the power of computers, because it's going to be such a creative medium. And like start to ask the questions that computer scientists don't necessarily know how to ask, but about humanity and about our societies, but artists know how to ask, or philosophers know how to ask. And it's more about using computer in the same way as you would use paint, or the same way as you would use Lego blocks or other mediums to express yourself.
It's not maybe about a mandatory thing, it's about access for everyone. Yes?
Yeah.
Hi. Just to add one more thing to your question. I think there are 5 times more computers in this room than people, or maybe 10 times.
Yeah.
That's how important the computers are. Every lamp up there has probably a computer inside. For what? Because you don't know how to turn on that lamp.
We can have this discussion at the bar
but
later.
That was not my question to you. My question to you is, well, actually it was also an answer. You said I need to learn more about data structures and stuff, and to that answer, my question is, I've been programming for 35 years. I know that I don't know anything. But the true master knows that he knows nothing. The apprentice thinks that he knows everything. So the more you learn, the more you know that you have to learn more.
Wasn't that Socrates who said that? Oh, pardon. Last question, Miss.
I work in vocational education, and I noticed that many students have no clue how to use their computers. They know how to open a Word or Excel, but that's about it. And then we see the movement where tablet schools, Steve Jobs schools, using tablets pop out of as the solution for the issue. Where now also research is coming out proving that just tapping on a tablet doesn't develop all the skills we need as a human being. So I'm really curious in what light do you see this new movement of the tablets versus what you're preaching or saying as using coding and a different way of thinking about?
Are you familiar with tablet schools and that format, or?
Yeah, I don't want to get too political. How do I say? So in Finland, we definitely have a similar situation where schools buy really expensive tablets and say that, yeah, we've solved the problem, now we've digitalized ourselves. And I think the whole discussion today is kind of an answer for your question, that it's definitely way more than buying a fancy computer to the school and teaching kids to create with computers. And learning those clear thinking structures happens outside of the screen. It happens in the sports classes, in the art classes, in the social sciences classes, and computer is just one tool.
Before we end the discussion, I would like to ask, are you working on maybe it's early because the Dutch translation just got out of Hello Ruben, are you working on a second book project as well?
Yeah, I'm working on the second book, and it's going to be a book about how computers work. So it's a story told by Alice in Wonderland type of a situation where Ruby crawls inside of a computer and learns how it works on the different abstraction levels, like how ones and zeros turn into how electricity turns into ones and zeros, and how the philosophical and mathematical structures turn into components. And if you don't know how a computer works, it's actually a really fascinating journey through abstractions and human thinking. So that's the second book.
We are at the end of the discussion. Before we end it finally, the bar is open because I think there are some more questions or conversations to be held. So make sure to do the third half over there. But before we let you go, I would like to give Linda one more applause for her presentation. Thank you, Linda. Remco, also, thank you for your contribution to the discussion. And of course, thank you for attending and for listening and for contributing as well. To the people at home as well, be safe and have a great weekend. Thank you.